Hey guys, so welcome to the second episode on the season 3 of the Teen Whisperer show, where you get to hear the stories and experiences of podcasters and how they have improved to being one of the best podcasters online. So today we have a guest who has been doing podcasts for almost 11 years. She is the host slash producer of DNA Today, which talks about discovery of new advances in genetics. That's actually really actually sounds really cool. And without further ado, let me introduce you to Kira Dineen. Kira, welcome to the show. Please tell a little bit about yourself and your podcasting career.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey. As you said, I've been podcasting since 2011, so I think almost 9 years now. And I've hosted a few different shows, mostly in the healthcare area. And so my main show is DNA Today. And I have a career in genetics. So this is kind of more of my show that I focus on, that I produce myself and have a team behind me. And it's been a really great experience to learn more about genetics through the show, and as I've gone through school, to be able to interview experts in the field and just hear about all different areas of genetics.
Wow, that's really great. And, just a kind of personal question. What actually inspired you to take this genetics? Because, one of the reasons why I never took a science major, because I actually got really high marks in science, but I never took a science major because I hate writing records. You have to write, you have to draw and all this stuff. I was actually really poor at it, because that's one of the reasons why I never took it. And when I see people like took these things, it's really amazing. So what inspired you to that?
I think genetics is such an interesting area because it's always changing, and so much of science and biology really is based in genetics. You always have some kind of genetic component or that's going to play a role in the science that you're looking at. And so I think that was just an interesting pull for me. I mean, as most people in genetics, you have high school biology at some point, and the genetics unit was the most interesting to me. But I think through the show, I've been able to learn more about how to be a science communicator and express the things that I was learning, and interviewing other people to say, okay, how can I take these really complex topics and put it into layman's term, or kind of go for that fourth grade reading level, so that anybody that's hearing it or reading about genetics can understand, because it is really complex. The more we learn about the genetics of humans and genetics in general, the more we realize how complex it really is. So it's been an interesting way for me to, at the beginning, explore different careers, because I started the show when I was in high school. And so, in these last, 8-9 years, it's been great to just hear about different areas of genetics. And I just graduated with my master's in genetics. So now I'm going to be working as a genetic counselor. And so this has really been a way of learning throughout that process. And the networking is great, just to connect with so many different people. And I think podcasting is such a great media, because you can, just like we did, we connected online and we're able to talk on here and share ideas. And it only takes a little bit of time, but you end up having really meaningful conversations and learn so much about what someone is studying and what someone is involved in. So I think that's been a really cool area for me to learn about genetics, but then also to start developing those skills of teaching genetics. And I don't know if you're familiar with what a genetic counselor does, but genetic counselors kind of help patients understand their own genetics and possibly go through genetic testing and help them understand what the choices are and what results could mean and everything that surrounds that. And so that's kind of why I ended up going towards genetic counseling, but podcasting has always been such a big aspect of my career.
Wow, that's really great. And before actually going into the real questions, this is something that I have to ask, like a mandatory thing. Like, what's your take on this coronavirus? In respect to this genetics, is there anything in relation to it? I'm not a science geek, so just is there anything like that?
There's been some research, certainly, of looking at genetics, and I don't know too much about that, little outside of my realm, but I think that that's such an important aspect of, I've seen a couple different articles and wanting to do research, and I think it sounds like there are some companies and organizations and institutions starting to do this, of looking at people who have had coronavirus and recovered from it, and seeing if there's any kind of genetic component that maybe predisposes you to be able to have the virus and beat it and recover from that. So I think there's so much in genetics that can be used and studied, going towards this vaccine that we're all anxiously awaiting. So I think genetics is definitely an area that is really important in all of this, along with all of the other areas with the vaccine. So yeah, definitely something that's really interesting, and I should read more up on that.
Well, do let us know once you've done that. Now, let us jump onto the podcast. So the first question is that how to properly, repurpose your podcast? Because I've seen your Facebook post where you have started your blog series, you have given many speeches and interviews, and all happened after you have launched your podcast in 2012 or 2011, if I'm being correct. So tell us a little about that.
So I think repurposing your content is so important. When you put out a podcast episode, you put it out once typically, and then some podcasters don't come back to that. They're like, okay, yep, but that was an episode from 5 years ago or 6 months ago or a month ago. But I think it's important to look at the episodes you're producing, and some of them are going to be content that is really just a one-time thing, and it's not really going to be relevant later on. So that might be something that an event that happened and it was very specific to that time, and the content from it was really just maybe that week or that month that was relevant to people. And years later, you don't really care. A lot of news stories are like that. You're not really going to revisit news stories from 5 years ago unless there's something that has been added to it and it's more of a storyline. But the content that can be reused, I've seen the term evergreen content. And so with that, it's important to kind of choose and dice out, all right, what's your evergreen content that you can be repurposing? And then what's your content that was really more of a one-time occurrence? And with that evergreen content, I think it's really important to see when in the year you can reuse that content. So at DNA Today, our team focuses on a lot of national awareness months, weeks, days. And so we've created a calendar so that for instance, June is Pride Month. We had an episode a couple months ago, or 2 episodes. It was a part 1, part 2, with the Baileys, who was a lesbian couple, and they had gone through reciprocal IVF, which is infertility treatment. So they were not able to get pregnant on their own. And so using a sperm donor and other aspects of that, they were able to have their own children. And so with that, we released that in April as part of our fertility series, because April is, I think the end of April is Infertility Awareness Week. And so we launched our series with that week. But looking at June being Pride Month, we're like, oh, this is another occurrence where we can use that episodes that we produced earlier in the year, say, let's repurpose this. Let's put it on social media, say Happy Pride Month, learn more about reciprocal IVF as an option for lesbian couples that are looking to create their families. And there's so many different paths to parenthood, but that being kind of an example of we can reuse that in June and re-promote that content. So there's a lot that you can look at. And I think National Awareness Days, Weeks, Months is a good place to start, because it kind of gives you an outline of, okay, it's Brain Awareness Month. Let's promote episodes about neurology or neurogenetics. And so there's so many different ideas within that. And I think that can be a good place to start, because it is kind of daunting of like, all right, how do I start repurposing this content? But I think that can be a good place to start.
Yeah, and choosing the priority, which would you prioritize first? Because most of the times it depends on like where our target audience are most of the time. Because in YouTube we may have like 30,000 subscribers, but when you go to Instagram, the person maybe have like 10,000 or 12,000 just followers. So which place do you prioritize first if you're like generalizing it? So like, do you repurpose it on YouTube, like according now we can put it on YouTube or Instagram, or transcripting it into a blog post? So which priority will you give it first?
I think that's really going to depend on the podcast and what their online presence looks like. For our team, we just launched on YouTube in May, so that I've been hesitant to join the video space because I've been an audio podcaster for years and years. And I always said, oh, I'm not going to go into video. That's not my thing. But hey, look, here I am right now. So I think that it depends on the show. I think video, I'm learning more and more how important it is. I was listening to a podcast conference end of May, and they were talking about how to utilize video in your podcasting. And I think that's something that I know I need to look more at. And that's been our focus with launching our YouTube channel. And that is one way that we repurpose content of with that launch, we have over 120 episodes. So we are taking all of our episodes and releasing a few every Thursday so that we are kind of going back into the vault. Now all of these episodes are available on our website, but we're taking that as how are we repurposing this? All right, let's take all the audio, turn it into video for our YouTube channel and release a few every week so that in 6 months' time, all of our episodes are going to be available on the YouTube channel. So that's something that we're looking at. All right, what's another level of repurposing content? I think for some people, their Twitter may be where they have the most engagement. And so I think it's important to look at where you have a lot of engagement and to keep that going. But think, all right, where are my other social media accounts and what does that engagement look like and how could I make it better? And sometimes repurposing that content can really help, especially if you are tapping into other markets. So if you have a show, and you have an episode that's focused on a topic, using specific hashtags related to that topic can help you. So when I was talking about our fertility series earlier, I have a genetics show. It's not a fertility show, but we did a series about the genetics of fertility. And so through that, we really tapped into the fertility area and people that are interested in fertility, either personally as a patient or if they're going into fertility in their career. And so those different online communities we were able to connect with, and we're continuing to do so. And so I think it's looking at really where you have the most engagement right now and to keep that going, but then say, all right, how are we going to grow? Because if you just keep using the same exact way, you're not going to end up growing at all. You can kind of keep the listeners going that you have, which is really important to have that solid listener core base. But in order to expand, looking at those other areas and repurposing your content in those places too.
Wow, that's a really great explanation. And jumping back on one or two those things that you are saying about the evergreen content, like something that's if I'm recording this podcast, like what are the problems that our podcasters are facing? No matter, like, it took years, some people will search for it, no matter what. But there are something like contents which are like in trending, right? Like this COVID-19, because it's not going to go over forever, but still people might look back at the history and say that something like this happened, we have survived this, and all that stuff. So. But there are some, like, things like in trend for at least, like, for a year or two, people will make podcasts for it. Do you think it's suggestible that, just for making that particular year of time, they're interested in that trend, and once it's done, they are not getting any listeners? So do you suggest, like, if I am say that I would like to go jump out of this trend and make a podcast on it, maybe it will go on for a year, but I just want to do it. So will you suggest something like that?
I think that can be good. I think looking at evergreen content as being something that can continue getting your show traffic over time is great, but you don't only have to have evergreen content. So I think you bring up a really good point that having content that's really relevant to that time is also going to bring you a lot of traffic right then. And if it's interesting enough where you have a podcast episode, say, about COVID-19, I mean, that I think people are going to be looking at for a long, long time. I mean, this is like it's a pandemic. So yeah, it's certainly going to be in our history books and, the new forms of that. I think that's kind of old school at this point. But having people listen to your podcast and then continue listening. So looking at that hook, how are you hooking people into your show? If it's a specific area, people that are really interested in that area hopefully will find you if you're posting in the right places and you're engaging with those online communities that already exist. But looking at those new listeners, if you're producing content that is going to be more of a hot topic, I think that can really help bring in those new listeners. And with that, you want to see, all right, what is the hot topics right now? And what is the hot topic in your area? Another hot topic in genetics right now is CRISPR, is a technology that allows for genetic editing, and it is so different than so many others. It's such a much quicker, faster, easier way to be editing genes compared to other methods that we've had in the past. And so when that started, I was like, oh, I got to make some episodes about CRISPR because people are searching this. So if they're searching this, I want to pop up in Google. I want to pop up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, now YouTube. So looking at what are hot topics in your area saying, all right, I got to make some episodes about that. And so some of those will continue, but others may not. But if you can hook people in with that topic and they show up in your search engine, then, and they listen and they're like, oh, that was interesting. Now they might listen to other episodes that are less of a hot topic at that time.
So it's kind of an added bonus, like and it also can add more traffic and retain some of the people who are listening itself. So that's a great point. Now, jumping on to the final question, this is kind of like off the podcast list, but still I think it will make a great question. So when you send me the list of things that you have done, the first question that popped into my mind is, does she have a clone of herself? Because many roles, many awards, nominations, studies in the same year. So this is something that I definitely need to ask you. I mean, like, isn't there like any time in your life where you felt like, God, I'm done with it? Please don't think like I'm asking this in a negative sense, but how you do it is something different than how you can do it. The ability, time management, and stuff. So please enlighten me with an answer for that.
I think with that, I first want to say that DNA Today does have a team. It started out with me starting the show, but Laura Markham has been absolutely instrumental in DNA Today's growth for the last year and a half. She is really so active behind the scenes. She's our marketing director at DNA Today. And we also have some other new people that have come on board kind of in the past 6 months. And so that has been a huge part of, I think, me realizing that I can only do so much. And so having people join the team and having it be a team approach has been really instrumental in having DNA Today grow and reach more people and kind of become bigger than it was before. But that being said, I think for podcasters, it's important to, before you start a podcast, record a bunch of episodes so that you have a backlog, and don't record one and then just release it and say, oh, I'll keep up with it, because things get busy and it really is good to release on a regular schedule. We release 2 a month right now, and that's what we've been doing for a couple of years. And so I think that's really important. And so, I just finished school, but during school, I would record a lot during my breaks, so my summer and my winter break. And so I would have a bunch of episodes for the next few months. And so I think that's been really helpful in doing that, and also kind of gives you a break. You look like you're active and doing it all the time, but you're able to say, all right, this is really a podcasting month. And then, you go 3-4 months without podcasting, and then you're like, oh, now I really want to get back into that again. So, you have the illusion of doing it every other week when you've really just worked hard different months. That's been a good way for me to do it. And so I think some people can kind of also take advantage of that approach. And again, before, if people haven't started a podcast yet and they're learning and trying to gather information on how to do that, I think it really is best to see how many episodes you can produce and then say, all right, how many should we release per month, per week, and kind of go from there. But yeah, it's definitely important to have team members and a schedule. I'm a crazy organized person, so that definitely plays its role.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, like, serious, like, like lately I've been suffering that for myself, because like every single time when I wake up in the morning, I have this bunch of things that I have to do right now. And when I see at the end of the night, like, I'll still see that bunch of things in my, notes. So it's not even a single thing is got strike off. But sometimes it's like a super productive day. It's like all the things gone and you have done extra things, but other days it's just aren't. So that's one of the reasons why I asked, because many podcasters, they will say that I couldn't release an episode because I'm busy and all that stuff. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that every episode has to be of 20 minutes or 30 minutes or like that, because people's attention span is actually growing really shorter every single day. So that account can be taken into account. And the final question is, this is something that I asked every one of my guests. What is actually your best tip that you can give a podcaster to help him grow, or whatever it is? The best tip in the world, according to you, that you can give to a fellow podcaster.
Best tip, no pressure. I would say that having an episode outline is really, really important, especially if you're starting podcasting. So all of the episodes that I've done throughout my shows, I've always had an episode outline. And so for me, I love Google Drive. I'm all about Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, all of that. I think it really helps virtual teams work together. And so I create an episode outline for each show, having the show intro, the guest intro, question bank. So I kind of think ahead and think through what are some questions I'd like to ask the guest. Then I have outro with links and whatever other things I need to plug at the end of the show. I send this to the guest ahead of time, and I find that it's really helpful because sometimes the guest will say, "There's 2 questions on here. I don't think that makes sense to ask," or "This isn't even on the right, train of thought. I don't do stuff like this." And so that's nice that I always send it to them ahead of time and say, "Hey, feel free to edit this, add anything, delete anything." But I only give them comment access so that I can see what they've deleted. Otherwise, I may not realize I put the question and then we're recording and I ask and then we got to re-record. So I think that can be really helpful. And I also have under that doc, a few pages down, the information for the blog post and the social media all in one spot so that the guests can look and say, oh, here's the graphics that the team created. And so I'm going to post this on my own channels. And so I think it really helps everybody stay organized and creates a nice flow for the interview. And it depends on your show. If you're more of a conversational, laid back show, this may not be as helpful. But if you're doing more of a proper interview, I think that can be a really helpful thing. So my tip is definitely
Be
episode
organized.
outlines with Google Docs.
And be organized. Yeah. I think that's actually people going to be like going to say in the comments, it's super hard, but still, let's try. If someone else in their position is trying it, of course, why can't they? Okay, so
Exactly.
the time is up. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. So is there anything else that you want to ask me?
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Jeffrey, for having me on the show. This was a lot of fun to talk about podcasting. But yeah, I really appreciate this. And I'm wondering, what else do you think you're going to be exploring or looking forward to on this show?
Well, one of the more times is that, I just want to give people information that's actually not much of that in the internet, like, emotional stuff and all that stuff. But one of the main reasons why I wanted to do podcast is that that's this code I have. I actually said this in another video itself, like to help those who can't help themselves. Like, people or someone who's trying to ask help and I'm just trying to give them as much as possible. But sometimes I really don't know why I'm doing this, but it's just, I just love talking, because you are like on the other side of the world and I'm here and, you have greater ideas. And if some of my people hear this, they will be like, oh, if he can do this, why can't I? If he has some kind of ideas that's actually explorable, why can't I? So that's the question that I want to just, tell the people to just get up and do it, because I never got that inspiration from anyone, from my circle. So I just thought, okay, let me be the first one to do it. So yeah, that's one of the things that I just want to, give out to the show. So yeah, I think, and the other thing is that I just want to promote this work I'm doing. This, Gary Vaynerchuk, right? The famous podcaster, is outside. He actually produced something called the audio tag. People like something like an intro music. It's kind of unique to that particular podcast itself. We and my producer, we are doing this. So we thought, okay, we can promote that by doing ads on the, podcast and all. So that's like the financial side of the thing. So yeah, I think that's the most of it that I would just want to explore out of the podcast.
That's very exciting to be talking to people throughout the world. And it really is such a unique aspect of podcasting, just to sit down and have a conversation that you don't know the person you're talking to often, and just being able to jump right into topics, I think is such a exciting area of podcasting. And it's just so cool that the podcasting community has really been even more connected, I think, during this pandemic. And everybody's sitting at home like, all right, how can we connect with other people? So I think that's really cool. And I'm glad that you're really active in the community.
Thank you so much. And the funniest thing is that there's no judgment. That's the thing I love about this, because people always think that like who's going to be, who is he, what's his character, what he has done so far. I mean, no judgment at all. Just hop onto it, share some ideas, and just spread it out to the world. That's the thing I love about this, because people are just so into judgment, like before even talking to someone. But I agree, there are bad people in the world. Of course, that's only when we will have balance. Still, this podcast community, that's one of the reasons I love about. And thank you so much for hopping on to the show. And it's really been great interviewing you. And because, after seeing your resume and, the stuff that you did, I was actually thought, okay, I'm done for. I'm actually going to make her talk all the, things, and I'm going to jump out of the show. Let she do all the talking. But still, thank you so much for coming on to this.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for having me. It's been a blast.
It's really great. So thank you so much, guys, for listening on to the show. And I have given everything in the description, like the Facebook page where I met her, and her podcast, and pretty much everything that if I list them out, I think the podcast will go on for another hour. So make sure to go and check out the links and show some love. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you, Kira. I'll see you next.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Bye.